Hi, sir. So for my CPT, I will be doing Man and the Monster Within. I'm just going to start with a quick quote, which is, "The scariest monsters are the ones that lurk within our souls." And I think that this quote relates to all three characters because all three characters had a tragic flaw about them and that they all had a downfall about them. And this was because of the monster which was within them, or the monster in quotations, that they were all facing, and all led to their eventual death for some of them. So for a quick overview of what I will be talking about is I will be starting with a classical poem, which is "Do Not Go Gentle Into That Good Night" by Dylan Thomas. My song will be "Bad Guy" by Billie Eilish, and my spoken word is "I Am" by me, Aileen. And all three of these authors are very well known, whether online or in the community, the current community. Dylan Thomas specifically is a very well-known poet, and he is a romantic poet, which I'll be talking about in the next slide. So Dylan Thomas was born in Uplands, United Kingdom on October 27th, 1914, and he is a Welsh poet and writer. And some of his most famous works include "Do Not Go Gentle Into That Good Night" and "Death Shall Have No Domain." He was influenced by the Romantic movement, and he was also influenced by the literary movement. These two movements coincided, and it's what he got most of his inspiration from. He is one of the most influential poets of his time, and he curated most of his poems from the movements which he was born into. Sadly, he passed away on November 9th, 1953, at the very young age of 39 due to a drinking problem. But even though he was so young when he died, he was able to create these very deep and meaningful poems, which was what made him such an influential and special poet. Next, I'll be talking about the themes present in "Do Not Go Gentle Into That Good Night." Some of the themes are suffering, grief, persistence, and the will to fight, and the monster within. I think that all of these themes relate drastically to the monster within as a huge theme, because each of them have something negative about themselves, such as suffering. In the poem, it relates a lot to suffering and what one has to go through to fight for one's life specifically. And that relates to the other theme, which is the persistence and the will to fight. So in all, the poem explores many challenges in timely manners. To the right, there's a little YouTube video, which is "Do Not Go Into That Good Night, Interstellar Tribute." And I think that the movie Interstellar relates a lot to the themes in "Do Not Go Gentle Into That Good Night." It is one of my favorite movies, and I think that if you watch it, the clip, it relates a lot to the poem, and the themes in the poem relate a lot to the movie, and it's just a very good film that you could watch along with the poem. Next is I'll be analyzing the poem "Do Not Go Gentle Into That Good Night." So the first part of the poem says, "Old age should burn and rave at close of day, rage against the dying of the light." This relates to the Crucible because John Proctor's final statement to Elizabeth clearly communicates his rage against the Salem government and how he deems to withstand them. So when John Proctor does eventually die, he still has a lot of rage in him because he believes that he could withstand them, and he knows that what they're doing is wrong, and what they're doing is out of manipulation from Abigail Williams. A quote to support this is Proctor says, "Give them no tear, tears pleasure them. Show honor now, show a stony heart, and sink them with it." So he is telling Elizabeth this because he wants to prove to her and tell her that to always stay strong and to not worry about them, since he has so much rage in his heart and so much anger because of the events taking place. The next part of the poem says, "Though wise men at their end know dark is right." This relates to Into the Wild because Chris McCandless willingly accepts his death. At this point in the novel, he believes he lived his life to his personal expectations and believes he is dying for a reason. So, at the end of the novel, when Chris McCandless eventually does die, he knows that he is dying for the right reasons and knows that God told him that he was supposed to die at that time. And a quote to support that says, "I need your help. I am injured near death and too weak to hike out of here. I am all alone." So this is a little note that Chris wrote to tell onlookers that if they passed them, that he was dying on the inside of the bus. The next part of the poem says, "Because their words had forked no lightning, they do not go gentle into that good night." That again relates to Into the Wild because Chris McCandless feels like he had achieved everything he had desired. Though he dies, he has fulfilled a timely and marketable life to himself. Where in the past he was living a life that was propagated by his parents and by society, he finally feels like he's living his own life. And that is proven through the quote that says, "The joy of life comes from our encounters with new experiences, and hence there is no greater joy than to have an endlessly changing horizon, for each day to have a new and different sun." So Chris writes this in his journal entry because he wants to prove that he has lived a timely and marketable life considered to himself. Ever since he decided to go to Alaska, that was his only path and his only way to live a marketable life to himself. The next part of the poem says, "Wild men who caught and sang the sun in flight, and learned too late they grieved it on its way." This relates to, I missed a part. The next part of the poem says, "Good men the last wave by, crying how bright their frail deeds might have danced in a green bay." This relates to the play Othello because Iago's manipulative actions and how he would deem himself as honest Iago when he was an individual who created the negative series of events in the story. So Iago deemed himself as an honest man, and same with the other individuals in the story, when in reality, the audience and people that were listening to the play knew from Iago's soliloquies that he was actually a wrong and not an honest man. This is seen through the quote, "A man he is of honesty and trust, and Iago is most honest." These are both quotes from Cassio in Othello when they're talking about Iago as an honest man. And this is very ironic because everyone in the play and every one of the listeners knows that Iago is in fact one of the most manipulative villains in Shakespeare's works. So it is very ironic that the main characters would perceive him like this and trust him so much. The next part of the poem says, "Wild men who caught and sang the sun in flight, and learned too late they grieved it on its way." This relates to Into the Wild because wild men are described in the stanza, and this relates to the wild nature of Chris McCandless. These type of men captured the world around them, similar to how McCandless would try to experience the wildness of nature. So Chris was trying to experience everything in his ability to experience the wildness of nature, specifically in Alaska. You can see this through a lot of his actions and a lot of his timely deeds that he did, such as going to the bus, staying in the bus, deciding to try to kill the moose, and trying to do a lot of the events that he did Into the Wild. This part of the poem also relates to the crucible because it describes individuals who have to pay for the actions of other individuals, such as John Proctor is hanged for the fabricated ideologies of others. Specifically, he's hanged because of the false manipulation by Abigail Williams. And this is also ironic because Abigail Williams started this whole witchcraft lie to get John Proctor and eventually kill his wife. But when John Proctor is deemed to die, he wants to keep one thing to himself, and it is said in the quote, because it is my name, because I cannot have another in my life, because I lie and sign myself to lies, because I'm not worth the dust on my feet of them and hang." So John Proctor wants to keep nothing but his name because he wants specifically his children and his wife to know that his name was something positive, and he doesn't want it to be forged and worked with. He wants his name to be clean in society and in Salem. And finally, the last part of the poem says, "Rage, rage against the dying of the night." And this relates to all three works, Othello, The Crucible, and Into the Wild, because all three characters in the novel die, but with rage and madness still consuming them. For example, Othello dies and kills himself after realizing that what he did to Desdemona was false, and that Iago was feeding him all these wrong lies. It also relates to Into the Wild because Chris McCandless dies because of a false and very small mistake, but this very false and small mistake costs him his life. So obviously he's very angry that this is happening to him. And it also relates to The Crucible because John Proctor dies knowing that he is dying for no reason, and he's dying for the false manipulation and ideologies of Abigail Williams. The next author which I will be talking about is Billie Eilish, and she is a very, very young singer. She was born on December 18th, 2001, so she's only 1 year older than us. She recently rose stardom with songs such as Ocean Eyes, Bad Guy, and When the Party's Over. And despite being so young, she's still one of the most influential singers of our time. Last year and this year, she rose to over 1 billion streams on Spotify and on YouTube. And that eventually led her to superstardom and led to this amazing, amazing singer. She has a very dark and meaningful undertone to her music. It specifically speaks to her life battles and what people her age go through in her normal life. And her songs also derive from her mental illness of depression and what she has to deal with in that time. Her songs appeal to the very youthful age because when she is a youth, she's able to relate with others of her age and of her time. Some of the themes present in Bad Guy by Billie Eilish is sexual actions, hate and physical abuse, manipulation, and questioning. So it is undoubtedly a shift from Billie's other music. In the song Bad Guy, we witness the realities of humanity and we learn and explore what it means to be a bad person or a monster through our words and our actions. In the video of Bad Guy, it is a very meaningful video that uses a lot of symbols to describe what our society deems to be a monster or a bad person through our actions and through our words. So I would recommend watching the video since it has a lot of symbols and it helps you understand the song more. So next I will be analyzing the song Bad Guy. So it starts with white shirt, now ride my bloody nose. And this relates to Othello because Cassio's reputation is known as white and pure, and it is something which he holds sacred, but when it is tampered with, it becomes stained or red. And Abigail Williams also experiences this with the John Proctor affair and how she wants to keep her reputation sane. But when, for example, Reverend Paris confronts her about it, she gets very, very scared. And she wants everyone to think that she is still a very kind and young girl who has not done anything wrong, though she is not. A quick quote to prove Cassio's reputation and how much he cared about it is, "Reputation, reputation, reputation. Oh, I have lost my reputation. I have lost the immortal part of myself, and what remains is Bastille. My reputation, Iago, my reputation." So this proves that how much Cassio cared and wanted his reputation to be white and wanted his reputation to be pure. The next part of the song says, "Creeping around like no one knows." This relates to Into the Wild because Chris McCandless goes on an independent adventure to Alaska. He does this without informing any of his loved ones, and this lonesome adventure leads to his death. And since he wouldn't really take the advice of others too, he did not get any insight from others who have experienced the same thing as Chris McCandless have. And a quick quote says, "Some people feel like they don't deserve love. They walk away quietly into empty spaces, trying to close the gaps of the past." This proves how much Chris McCandless wanted to be independent and how he wanted to be with himself and no one else. It also proves how he wouldn't take anyone else's advice and how he wanted to do everything for himself and to experience new things in nature. The next part of the song says, "Bruises on both my knees for you, don't say thank you or please." This relates to Othello because Desdemona has to deal with the major and deadly consequences of Othello's jealousy and false lies which are fed to him by Iago. So, since she is being fed all this false accusation, she is getting persecuted for the wrong and for reasons which cannot be described, since they are false. And the quote says, "And yet I fear you, for you are fatal. When your eyes roll so, why I should fear, I know not, since guiltiness, I know not, but yet I feel fear." So this quote is right before Othello kills Desdemona, and she's talking to Othello, trying to understand why he is so mad at her and why he's trying to kill her, even though she has done nothing wrong. The next part of the song says, "Even if you know that you don't own me, I'll let you play the role, I'll be your animal." This relates to the Crucible because Abigail Williams manipulates the community of Salem and treats individuals such as Elizabeth Proctor as animals. Though Elizabeth knows the realities of Abigail's actions, she still acts as if she's pure in the court. In the court, Abigail acts like she hasn't not seen the witch trials. She acts like everything is real, even though both John Proctor and herself know that this is false. A quote to support this is when Abigail Williams is talking to Reverend Paris and says, Elizabeth Proctor is a conniving liar. The next part of the song says, if she reads all the lyrics. This relates to the crucible because reads all the lyrics is a metaphor for telling the truth, which is what Abigail Williams was now accomplishing through the events in the crucible. A quote that supports this is, and that is all, and mark this, let either of you breathe a word or the edge of a word about the other things, and I will come to you in the black of some terrible night, and will bring a pointed reckoning that will shudder you. This proves that how scared Abigail Williams was that she would be exposed even more to the Salem government. And though she tells everyone that she's telling the truth, she's still so guarded about how many lies she is told. So it is very ironic that this happened. The next part says, she'll pity the men I know. This relates to Othello because Amelia exposes Iago for his lies, which eventually leads to both her own and Iago's death. Through these events, she pities Iago. And lastly, in the middle of the song, it says, "My soul so cynical," and this is relevant to all the books, referencing Tris McCandless, Othello, and Abigail, because all of them were very cynical and very deriving in their own unique way. So I'll be doing a part 2 of it now, since this song was very interesting and very long. So the first part of the song says, I'm only good at being bad. I like when you get mad. So this relates to Othello because this is seen through Iago's negative persona and manipulative tactics. He finds it humorous and enjoys when Othello believes in the lies that he is feeding him, proving his wickedness. So Iago was very, very happy that Othello was being fed all these lies and believing what he was saying because Iago wanted to have that power, and since he hated Othello so much, he found it very amusing that this was happening to him. And a quote to support this is, so will I turn her virtue into pitch, and out of her own goodness make the net that shall enmesh them all, which is a direct statement of the point. The next part of the song says, I guess I'm pretty glad that you're alone. You said she's scared of me. This relates to the crucible in probably a very, very drastic way because Abigail Williams is attempting to get the attention of John Proctor. When John visits Salem and Abigail visits him, they're telling him the witch trials are not true. Also, when Elizabeth kicks Abigail out of the house, this proves her fear and negativity towards the affair between John and Abigail. So both of these events coinciding are very, very direct to the song. Abigail Williams just wanted John Proctor to herself, and Elizabeth Proctor is obviously, though she doesn't say it, is very scared of Abigail, that she is hurting, which she obviously was, hurting the marriage between John and herself. The next part of the quote says, I don't see what she sees. Oh, a quick quote says, but in my sickness, you see, sir, I were a long time sick after my last boy, and I thought I saw my husband somewhat turning from me, and this girl, this is said in the court when Elizabeth is talking about Abigail and how much she hates her in a way. So the next part of the song, it relates to Into the Wild because Chris McCandless felt like he was viewing a different part of the society when he was exploring nature in a more abstract and unique way. Because Chris had never experienced something like this before, he felt like he was experiencing a whole new part of nature, and he was experiencing the world in a way that no one else was. And the quote to support this is, all true meaning resides in the personal relationship to a phenomenon, what it means to you. The next part of the quote says, but maybe it's because I'm wearing your cologne, I'm a bad guy. This relates to Othello because Desdemona was falsely accused to cheating on Othello. This is done through the misogynistic manipulation implemented by Iago, with the handkerchief specifically, and because of the false negativity, she is labeled as a bad guy. The next part of the song says, so you're a tough guy, like a really rough guy. This relates to Into the Wild because McCandless was willing to venture to Alaska with a limited amount of supplies and experience. When doing this, he experienced a very rough journey. So he believes that he can go to Alaska without any trials and tribulations, yet he experiences such negative side effects which eventually lead to his death. And the last part of the song says, make your mama sad type, make your girlfriend mad type, might seduce your dad type. This relates to a quick quote for that is, for Into the Wild says, no phone, no pool, no pets, no cigarettes, ultimate freedom, no longer to be poisoned by civilization. This is a very powerful quote from Into the Wild because McCandless really felt like he was experiencing a whole part of nature and that he wasn't going to experience the same type of society which he was grown up with, and how he was propagandized by his parents and how he wanted to live his own life without the influence from his society and from specifically his parents. And again, the last part of the quote relates to Othello and the Crucible. Othello, because Iago's manipulative tactics was constantly curating a built society based on his own ideas and ideologies, and he caused the events in Othello to happen. And lastly, the Crucible, because Abigail Williams was a manipulator in Salem and caused all 19 individuals to die based on her own reputation and personal needs. This is seen because Abigail Williams was willing to do anything at any cost, which is eventually killing 19 individuals because she was very selfish and wanted everything for herself. The last poem that I'm going to be talking about is I Am by me and Aileen, and this is a spoken word poem. So me and Aileen, as she calls herself, is a very well-known online poet. She is very well-known in the poetry industry and has many famous poetry on the web. Her most famous piece of poetry, which she has written, is I Am, and this is a poem similar to poems which we have studied in class. In this poem, we explore her identity and what it means to be yourself in a world where you may be misguided and told to change who you are as a person. Through this poem, we can see what others and individuals do, and how the theme, and we can also see how this theme shows the theme of man and the monster within, since it uses a lot of oxymorons to argue the past statement. So some of the themes that are present in this spoken word is two-sided behavior, understanding, man and the monster within, and questioning. So I Am by online poet Mina Aileen explores the drastic ideology of what our current society finds as understanding oneself. This spoken word uses oxymorons to depict the previous statement which was stated. This continues throughout the entire poem. So this poem is very unique since it has the same format throughout the entire poem, but we learn more about the author as we continue the poem. So now I'm going to be analyzing the poem, and it says, the first statement says, I am warm-hearted and icy cold. This relates to Othello because Iago is known around Venice as Honest Iago, but the listeners know the true nature of his character, who is a manipulative and vile person. A quote to support this is, plague him with flies, though that his joy be joy, yet throw such changes of vection on, as it may lose some color. So this proves Iago's very two-sided personality and how he wanted others to see him as one person where he really was someone else. The next part of the spoken word says, I am fragile yet tough as a man, struggle through life with no real pain. So this relates to the Crucible because Abigail Williams portrays herself to the town of Salem as a desperate, hurt, and frail girl, when in reality she is a manipulative liar causing the witch hunts to coincide. A quote to support this is, I want to open myself, I want the light of God, I want the sweet love of Jesus. I danced for the devil, I saw him, I wrote in his book, I go back to Jesus, I kiss his hand. This shows how fake Abigail was to the Salem community and how much she wanted to manipulate others just for her own selfishness and for her own desires. The next part of the spoken word says, I am a sinner with a halo of gold, an open book with secrets untold. This relates to the Crucible again, because John Proctor is known as a pure man and a good man in the town of Salem, but no one is aware of his affair with Abigail Williams, which makes him a sinner to himself. He is known as a truthful individual, yet he has numerous unknown secrets. So to himself, he is a very sinful and very vile man, but to others he is seen as a very good and holy person. We can see this through the quote because I cannot speak, but I am doubted every moment judged for lies, as though I come into the court when I come into this house. This is a quote when he is talking to Elizabeth, saying that he is a very truthful and a very good person, though he knows to himself he is not. He's doing this because he is so upset with himself and what he is doing. The next part of the spoken word says, "A bleeding heart and I don't care." This relates to Into the Wild because Chris McCandless journeys to Alaska, knowing that this journey could easily lead to his death, yet he still persists on going on the adventure, despite all the sadness that he knows that his parents will feel that he is going on this adventure. He still goes on it, knowing that he is going to get the consequences if he doesn't talk to someone about it. It also relates to Othello because Iago manipulates and forces situations into specific ways to benefit his own well-being. He hurts and eventually kills people in the way of his own benefit. It is similar to Abigail Williams in The Crucible. And a quote from Iago says, "I followed him to serve my turn upon him." This really shows his two-sidedness and how he was like one person one way and he was a totally different person another way. Another part of the spoken word is, "Forever forgiving, I still keep score." This relates to Othello because Othello keeps being fed false information about Desdemona, trying to find a valid reason. He kills her out of madness and uncertainty. Since he is being fed all this false information by Iago, he is really trying to find a real reason to forgive her and a real reason to not trust Iago, but he is very, very jealous, and that is a tragic flaw about him. He is not forgiving, and he always keeps score about the flaws about Desdemona and the reasons why he should do stuff to her. The last part of the spoken word in part 1 is, "I am unstable and wonderfully wise." This relates to Into the Wild because Wayne Westerberg was not a very smart or educationally intellectual man, but he was an extremely influential figure in Chris McCandless' life. Even though Wayne Westerberg was not a very smart person in that way, he curated a very ideological way for Chris McCandless to live his life and how Chris wanted to live his life if he survived in the future. And Wayne Westerberg is a very big influence on Chris McCandless in that way. Next, we move on to part 2 of the spoken word, and we start off with, "I am awkward and well-refined, lost, insightful, and a little love-blind." This relates to Into the Wild because the journey which Chris goes on is a very dangerous, yet to him, and in his personal opinion, it is a well-planned out and safe. Throughout his Alaskan adventure, he is so focused that he does not take into account the other important events in his life, such as a love life, specifically with Tracy, as we see. A quote by Chris McCandless, which relates to the point very, very specifically, is, "I don't want to know what time it is. I don't want to know what day it is. I don't know what day it is or where I am. None of that matters." This proves how driven he was to what he was doing and what he wanted to do at that specific time, and it proved how focused he was in achieving what he wanted to achieve, no matter the circumstance. The second part of the spoken word says, "I am respected and I am addicted, shamed by my burdens, self-inflicted." This relates to The Crucible because Abigail Williams, when in court testifying, is known as a respected individual. Though she knows that she is false, she is still addicted to the ideology of telling the individuals of Salem that there is a witch hunt taking place with the devil. Since she is doing this, she proves her very manipulative self, just like Iago, because Abigail and Iago are very, very similar characters. She's very addicted to hurting others because of her own selfishness, and she's very addicted to making her own ideas and making her own reasons to do the things that she does. A quote by her is, "I have been hurt, Mr. Danforth. I have seen my blood running out. I have been near to murdered every day because I am done my duty, pointing out the devil's people, and this is what my reward, to be mistreated, denied, and questioned." She's using her power in the court to overthrow big individuals such as Mr. Danforth, and she's misusing this power drastically, which leads to the downfall of so many individuals in Salem. The next part is, "I am nocturnal, a creature of nature, a creature of night, blissfully ignorant, typically right." This relates to Othello because throughout the play, Emilia is known as a side character and is not very well known throughout the play. But ironically, she is the individual who exposes Iago for his manipulative lies, and she's the individual who takes down the whole plot of Othello and exposes Iago for his lies. Though she's not very well known in the character, she's a very important character in the play. And a quote by Emilia is, "O mistress, villainy hath made mocks with love. My husband say that she was false. If he say so, may his pernicious soul rot half a grain of day. He lies to the heart." This proves Iago's very manipulative character and how much Emilia wanted to take him down. And so throughout the play, Emilia is known as a side character and is not very well known throughout the play, but ironically she is the individual who exposes Iago for his manipulative lies. Though she is not very well known throughout the play, she is the one that exposes Iago and causes everyone to be exposed and shows Othello what the truth is. Even though she is not well known throughout the play again, it is very ironic that she is the one to take him down, specifically because she is a woman and because she is Iago's wife. Iago was not suspecting this at all. The second to last point is, "A loser, a quitter, still I persevere. I am brilliant and easily amused." This relates to Into the Wild because the many individuals whom Michaelis met on his journey persistently told him that he would not be able to go to Alaska. But when he does reach his desired area, he is amused by the smallest occurrences such as seeing a flock of deer or finding more food. This proves how persistent he was in going to Alaska and going on this journey. He is so easily amused by the smallest things that not any normal person would be amused by, such as finding a flock of deer or finding more food or even finding a very rotted bus in the middle of nowhere. He's very amused by the very small things of life. And finally, the last point is a habitual liar, just keeping it real. This relates to Othello because Iago's manipulative lies, which coincide throughout the play, he creates these events with such animosity that everyone who is affected believes that he is still a pure and hero-like character. Iago creates these events to take place in his own mind, and they're curated so well and thought out so well that everyone even thinks of him as a hero figure, though he is the one that is causing all this negativity. A quote says, "I know Iago, my honesty and love doth mince this matter." This is very ironic because when Cassio says this, he is going to be actually manipulated and sawed down by Iago. So though he is speaking so high of him, he is going to be let down by him. So finally, I'm going to be talking about the overall statement of the spoken word. And it is this entire spoken word is a direct rendition to the character of Iago and Abigail. In each stanza of the poem, we witness the author using oxymorons to depict the past statement. This is similar to both Abigail and Iago's split personalities, which is personality which is personally driven and personality which manipulates others in a negative way. So overall, this entire spoken word is a direct rendition to, I think, Abigail and Iago the most, because they had two different personalities and two different statements to be made throughout the entirety of their books and their characters. That is the end of my presentation. I will send you both the PowerPoint separately, and I will send you this voice recording so you can look at both things, both with the presentation part and just with the PowerPoint. And if you would like my work cited, it is right after this slide. It is right here. So thank you.